So today what we're doing is we're talking about how to create space in our artwork. So there's several different steps to think about when you're thinking about creating a landscape or any piece that should have depth or space, which should be almost everything. So for starters, you think about the placement on the page. So I'm going to have you guys write this down in your notes. So the first thing that we think about is placement on page. The second thing that we're thinking about is our scale. So how large something is in comparison to something else. And we'll talk about this a little bit more. So write this down, number 2, scale. And the third thing that we're talking about is overlapping. So to make even two spheres that are close to the same proximity to the viewer, if one of them is overlapping the other one, it will help it to look like it is closer that way. So overlap. The fourth thing that we're thinking of is detail. So the things that are closest to us should have the most detail. And likewise, when we're thinking of this goes pretty hand in hand, but we're thinking of contrast. So the brightest colors, the most contrasting values, those things are always the things that are closest to us. So let's jump in. So first thing, to create something that looks like it's closer to me, I would have it towards the bottom of the page. And to make something look like it's farther away, I would create something that is closer to the vanishing point, which is usually towards the top, the horizon line. So when I talk about perspective, this will just be a second, but I'm going to use this marker since it's kind of going out. I'm still thinking of my compositional tools like my rule of thirds, right? So my horizon line might be on my rule of thirds. And I know that that's not the most straight line, but that's okay for what we're doing today. So you guys remember learning the 1 point perspective rule in drawing 1. So if I wanted to create something that was coming back in space, I might create something like this that is a road, right? Or it could be the tool to use for the top of a house, right? So maybe all my horizontal lines are going to stay horizontal for this. So I'm thinking that for the top of my house, I might have that this would help me to create some depth and space. So that for this, I might create more than one line coming from the vanishing point. So I can go here, maybe have this be the peak of my house. Maybe have it go a little wider. All my vertical lines are going to stay vertical if that's the end point of my house. This is just really to help me with scale and sizing. So at this point, connect to here, connect to here. So that this, where I know where the back of my house would end, would be like that. Maybe I have some fencing. If I were to create a line of trees, that I would know how big each of the tops of the trees should be. So that this really isn't, you're not going to still see the lines at the end. That the lines are just kind of a guide. So that I know that these trees back here should just all be tiny. Maybe I have somebody's looking over their balcony, and then this would be the railing. Just to create some kind of overlap of some sorts. Maybe this is their garage door. So the things that are closest to you have the most detail, and the things that are farthest away. Likewise, some of the clouds at the top are usually the biggest, and the ones towards the horizon line are the smallest. So I can show that everything vanishes as it gets towards the horizon line and towards our vanishing point. Notes that these are all going to count as your practice, experimentation, and revision score for your process portfolio. Another one of these is the 2-point perspective. So I might even just use some kind of pencil to mark on outside of my board where my 2-point perspective guides are going to be. And I'm going to do one that is a concave and one that is convex. Now when you do this, you will use a ruler. I'm not using a ruler today because it makes it harder to kind of see what I'm getting at or what I am doing. So for this one, I'm going to start with a room. So this is interior. So concave and convex mean like a curve. But what I'm talking about is whether the 2-point perspectives converge into a point where you can see so much like the exterior of something versus the interior. So I'm going to do some kind of a room. So I'm going to have it go connect from here to here. And then I'm going to have it connect as large as I'd like for it to be on the page. And I'm going to try to mirror this length so that it's pretty symmetrical. And so I'm going to connect this to this vanishing point to the best of my ability, drawing straight lines. And then this vanishing point connects here to here. Okay. This vanishing point needs to be a little higher. Okay, there we go. And then I will draw kind of a straight line of some kind. So I think this one might be a little bit higher. We want it to connect here. But you get the point that I am making the walls, where the walls meet the floors of a room. And so then everything in this room would then connect to this. So if I were going to make a window over here, so everything would connect. So this top of where I want my window, say this is the top of the window, then that would connect to this dot over here. So we have a 2 vanishing point system. All of my vertical lines stay completely vertical, or as much as I can to my ability. Okay, so then we have a box, so that could stand in as a window. And then my vertical lines stay vertical. And then if I wanted to have some kind of opposite, so to come from here, it would have to connect to the vanishing point. Does that make sense? So this would be the end, and then it would have to connect to here. And I'm just kind of doing it with my eyes. You would use a ruler, but I don't want to block your ability to see what I'm doing. So if I wanted to, say, make a couch on this side, that the top of the couch would have to connect to this vanishing point here. And then this curve, the edge of the couch, could be curved, but it would still follow, everything follows the rule of connecting to the opposite vanishing point. So then I've got to have. Now likewise, I would use a 2-point perspective to show 2 perspectives converging. So like the edge or corner of a box, I could use this for. So you guys know that if I were to draw a building or a city, that if any of the buildings, I could see the edge of the corner of the building pretty well, that you could use this perspective trick on this as well. So I would draw a vanishing point, and then I could use this as my corner, and then this, and then I would cut off the building here, and I could create windows, and all of the windows would have to converge to that point in space as well. And if the door, all my verticals stay vertical, just like in the last one, that everything would have to match up that way. And if I was, so say this windowsill, I can see underneath it, that I would do this to see this corner would connect here, and then this would connect to this vanishing point. So all of the details have to all follow the rules. They all follow those perspective line rules. So if I wanted to make a canopy on this side, the top of it would match here. And then to make any kind of box that I am thinking of what this side would look like. So to create something that the shapes, see, these would be easier if I could use a ruler, but you know, for our sake here, so if I were to make bricks even, that everything would have to connect to my vanishing point on this side. So if I drew the brick lines straight up and down, everything that I worked for would become flat again. So the outside, if I'm designing cabinets, or if I'm designing sinks or a countertop, here I'll just do one down here, that this comes in handy, because I can see the shapes and the space of the countertop. So I'll just use that for the top of my countertop, it looks like. So that maybe, and remember, as you go back, they get closer and closer together, right? So if it's the edge of something, that this helps you plan where. Okay, so when we're looking at some of these things that we've already said to be true, so placement on page, so down here would be the most detail, likely the closest to us. So this tree that is closest to us has the most visible details. So we might even see some grass, we might see some individual shading on different patches of the tree. So down here is the most, is the closest to us. Likewise, it's the largest because of that number 2 scale. So down here, all these telephone lines that are closest to us would be the largest, would have the, that they would be the thickest because they're the closest to us. And then overlapping, so if I have a tree behind this tree, or behind, yeah, it's overlapping that tree a little bit, but it's also doing is overlapping where this house is. So that this overlapping shows that one is behind the other. So that can show depth in space as well. So for detail, that this house, so I started creating like a little shed back here, or it could be someone's house, that this little shed would be less detailed than this house that is closest. And contrast, so the lightest lights, the darkest darks, the most vibrant colors, if you're using color at all, is going to show up in the foreground. So foreground, middle ground, background. This background area, the trees, when students that I've noticed have done trees in this way, that they want to go for green, even back here. But a lot of the trees in the horizon are usually like a gray, blue, and that building that up a little bit, your eyes perceive it to be bright green, even though if you were to hold a card of a color up, that it would be closest to kind of a gray blue. So same with contrast, you want it to be the most dull towards the horizon, and then the brightest, most vibrant, pure colors and most value contrast towards the foreground. I hope that this helps. Great job practicing and showing your experimentation with space.